Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our session on wildfires and smoke-ready communities. Just making sure everyone has a chance to get in okay to the session. Well, thank you for joining us. I know you've got a lot of different sessions to choose from today. Looking forward to sharing some really great information with you. My name is Sarah Sullivan, and I am the Children's Environmental Health and Healthy Schools Coordinator for EPA Region 9. With me today are some really fantastic panelists. I'll first talk briefly about the health effects of wildfire smoke. Sorry, Kelly, can you go to the second slide? My apologies, I have to remember to do that. So I'm going to talk briefly about the health effects of wildfire smoke. Then I'll turn it over to Chris Ray, the Air Quality Program Manager with the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. Chris is going to share some of his experience and talk about becoming a smoke-ready community. After Chris, we'll turn it over to James Payne, an Environmental Protection Specialist at the EPA Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards, and Kelly Schwarb, an Air and Radiation Program Analyst at EPA Region 9. James and Kelly are going to cover some EPA tools and resources to help reduce exposure to wildfire smoke. Our final panelist will be Mary Claire Haino, an environmental health social scientist at the EPA Office of Research and Development. Mary Claire will provide information about an EPA research project and smoke-ready communities framework. We'll then wrap it up with some time for questions. Slides for the presentation are posted to the session website, and we encourage you to download them to reference and also follow the links that are included throughout. Between 2000 and 2018, the average number of acres burned each year nearly doubled to 6.9 million acres nationally. Wildfires are having a significant impact on the economy, mental health, learning, infrastructure, housing, and health. Next slide, please. Not only is the increase in frequency and intensity of wildfires problematic for those in the communities in the immediate area, but even those hundreds of miles away can see significant smoke impacts. During the Butte County Camp Fire in 2018, air quality across Northern California ranged from unhealthy to hazardous from November 8th until the rains started on November 21st. The map on the screen shows the location of the campfire and hourly air quality data over the 10-day period. It also shows distances. You can see Chico right near the fire, which is about 12 miles away, then Sacramento 80 miles away, and San Francisco 134 miles away. You can see that millions of people were exposed to unhealthy, very unhealthy, and hazardous air quality conditions in these very heavily populated areas. Next slide, please. The biggest health threat from smoke is from fine particles, which we call particulate matter, or PM 2.5. These microscopic particles can penetrate deep into your lungs and cause a range of health problems. Next slide. Smoke can affect breathing when inhaled. Short-term health effects from severe exposure to wildfire smoke include those in the nose and throat, burning eyes, itchy eyes, sore throat, coughing, runny nose, sneezing. Given that wildfires are expected to continue with climate change, these repeated exposures may also have long-term health effects, such as heart and lung disease. Some components of wildfire smoke, including particulate matter, formaldehyde, and benzene, are also known to be carcinogenic and cause cancer. A wildfire in a community may also be very stressful and upsetting to both children and adults. Wildfires have been associated with such things as changes in infant feeding behavior and psychiatric symptoms, including PTSD and depression. Next slide. While breathing particulate matter can be harmful to everyone, there are some people more at risk for negative health effects than others, including children, the elderly, pregnant people, and those with pre-existing conditions such as asthma. Smoke inhalation is especially harmful to children because they breathe faster and they breathe more air for their body weight compared to adults. They're also more likely to be active outside. We know that chronic exposure to air pollution like that seen in wildfire smoke can have lifelong health impacts for children, such as lowered lung function. Research also suggests that exposure to particulate matter may have neurocognitive effects in children, including associations with ADHD, school performance, and memory. I'm going to turn it over to Chris Ray to talk more about smoke-ready communities, which help protect community members from wildfire smoke exposure.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Chris Wright. I work in north central Washington State up here in EPA Region 10. Our reservation is 1.4 million acres, mostly forested, so we're prone to burn, and we have frequently, unfortunately. So I do a lot of work with wildfire smoke and becoming smoke ready within the reservation and across the nation during different talks with different groups too. So this is a brief rendition of this topic. We can talk for days on it. And so next slide. So what does smoke ready really mean to everybody? Well, it's all community based, and communities can be termed as your towns, your grouping of housing, your family, your extended family, or just an individual could be your community. So whatever you define as your smoke ready, as your community, that's what you plan for. And you plan for all sources of smoke, although we'll be mainly focusing on wildfire smoke because that is the biggest cause of or source of smoke we have. We also have industry, wood stove burning, backyard burning. So all sources of smoke, because you want to limit your yearly smoke exposure. That will help your health outcomes be better because all sources of smoke puts PM 2.5 into your lungs. And that's what you want to minimize because you want to prevent all your health problems associated with smoke, as outlined before. And we do this a lot through education outreach opportunities we've developed in our area and across the state and with all our partners. And that's the best way to reach people, is to just keep teaching people over and over and over again on how to do that. And part of that teaching is to give them mitigation actions, such as use of fans and other ways to manage your buildings and stuff like that, which we can cover a little later. But the coordination with partners is very important. That's the best way to get the word out to everybody, because one program can't do it all. It's just a huge topic, and partners are great to do that. And we've developed great partnerships throughout our region and state and local also. Next slide. So wildfire smoke is the most important air quality issue we face in our area. It dwarfs by orders of magnitude every other source of smoke, including prescribed fires and anything else. It's huge. And the importance of it varies for people's minds, depending on whether it's local or comes from Russia or California or someplace else from a little bit more remote. But the pictures in the background are all taken locally, and I'm sure many people in California have similar pictures too. Next slide. So what I did a long time ago is I mapped out our sources of smoke, and wildfire smoke we can get from June through October, and sometimes to November. It depends on the year. But most of our sources are residential wood stove smoke, people burning their yard debris, agricultural fires, some prescribed fires, and industry. And so that's October through April, which is also our inversion season, which holds that smoke into our valleys. So just be aware of that also, your topographical differences. Next. So I divide my smoke readiness into 3 sections: pre-smoke event, smoke event, and post-smoke events. So some of the things we do during pre-smoke events is we get our communication channels going again. We try to meet everybody that we need to meet before that happens. We get out our templates and fact sheets and do some promotions to get people emergency go kits ready by adding N95 mask and taking along a box fan filter with them, because you never know where you're going to go for if you have to evacuate. So we get all those stuff updated ahead of time just to be prepared for that smoke event. Next. So during smoke events, we've distributed a lot of N95 masks when they were available before pandemic. Talked to a lot of people about managing their buildings for cleaner air, how to manage their doors, their clean rooms, just being aware of smoke intrusion into your buildings. We've Also give out a visual guide to AQI because we oftentimes lose electricity in all forms of communications. So it's good to have those tools, options available. And then we document and record. We do a lot of monitoring and recording of all the fire information that we can gather. Next slide. Of course, one of the mitigation actions we do during the time is box fan filters and other filters in our lives. The manufactured filters on top here, one's a Lasco made for purpose box fan filter unit. The other one's another brand is made for purpose for cleaning your air. But also don't forget about your air filter in your vehicle, because those are the two indoor environments we spend in buildings and in our vehicles during fire, smoke seasons. Mitigation actions anyway. Next, please. So after the smoke, we also need to clean our buildings sometimes. If you got hazardous air for a week, your buildings will accumulate a lot of smoke inside, and it'll stick to your walls. So sometimes you have to residual odors and stuff. So you shampoo your carpet, your laundry, your clothes. It takes a lot of time. Don't use scented candles or air fresheners because they just mask the smell and they really don't help your lungs a bit. If you have air filters in your house, you can go ahead and change those out. And if you need to, you can clean and check your ductworks also. Next slide. But smoke isn't just wildfire smoke. We also have wood stove smoke, because 50% of our population has wood stoves as their main and only heating source. So we've done some buybacks, we've done some change outs, we promote dry wood production or promotions, and just do a lot more smoke outreach during those times. We also do a lot of vegetation debris burning in our area, and so we want people to do alternatives to that by composting. We have community chipping events. We promote mulching of that material, or just taking it to the landfill, just anything but burning it, because we don't want that increase in our yearly smoke exposure, whether it's in your neighborhood or over a large area like on wildfire smoke. Okay. So that was a quick smoke ready ideas. The major slide was that first one, where the characteristics of a smoke ready community, because that's the important part that you need to understand in order to help get that into your work plans if you're trying to put these into a GAP or a IGAP or a 103 or Clean Air Act 103 or 105 work plan. So it's very important. And just be aware that becoming smoke ready is not a 1-month endeavor. It's more like a 10-year endeavor, because every year I've learned something more about smoke and how that affects our population, where the smoke comes from, and it just keeps evolving. Unfortunately, the smoke ready concept has become a nationally wide understood and picked up by the EPA and other agencies because it's so important for people to understand and protect ourselves from the smoke. So the next slide is just a bunch of resources that I put together that you'll be able to download and get some other information, some tribal courses that I help teach, and some other information there too. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, go ahead and contact me and I'll be happy to help you out. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next up, we have James and Kelly to talk about some smoke ready and EPA tools and resources. James, if you're speaking, you may be on mute.
I am ready to go.
All right.
All right. So, yeah, it's always tough to follow Chris. I've been following Chris and his work for several years, and it's always great to see the work and the development he's done, as well as what he's done on the community. Always learn and continue. So, kudos to Chris. Chris is definitely one of the top folks that you want to read out to with smoke ready communities. Pioneer in that. So definitely great. Good job, Chris. Always from you. So I'm going to go over a few different websites that folks navigate and understand. You don't have a modeler, you don't have to be an analyst, but I'm going to throw out 6 or 7 different websites, different tools that you can wind up in order to do just that. Let your communities and understand what's going on. I'll throw out not an expert on any single one of these tools. You'll see as we go along, there is a lot of information on most all of them, and so I always encourage folks to really get in there and just play with the data, play with the information, see what you can see, tailor it to your area, and I'll kind of cover some of those different areas that can be tailored as we go along, and I'll try to break as we go along too. So the first one here is the HRRR smoke. So that stands for the High Resolution Rapid Refresh. Basically a model, it's an atmospheric model that provides data in near real time and small spatial resolution, 3 kilometers. It provides hourly updates. It taking clouds and convection currents into account, and it provides all those different reports. I don't think I can hover and map, but if you look on to the that little chart there, yeah, exactly. All that different information, smoke, vertically integrated smoke, which we'll take a look at, precipitation, temperature, a lot of different things. You can see how up to date it is by all the hours, and you can go in there, whether the information loops. So it's information to check out. So if we want to go to the next slide, we look at one of the outputs, and I'm going to look at, I selected the integrated smoke, and you can see that up at the top right corner of that. That is showing the values in micrograms per square meter, how it's integrated in a vertical channel. So it's, different information is really great to utilize when we're trying to understand, smoke, especially, thing like this, and we want to know, well, that fire is going down in Southern California, but is it really going to wind up affecting me up in Northern California, Arizona? Well, like Chris said, being prepared to have those smoke communities. Just because you may not have an active fire on or near the res, you may wind up being impacted by smoke, several miles, if 10, 50, 100 miles away. So that's purpose different tools. Next slide. So this is the United States Forest Service monitoring map, and it's really been super fire and smoke map. Matter of fact, if you look at the little can disclaimer, not disclaimer, but look out there, it's actually saying, hey, you know what? Check out the fire and smoke map. It provides a link there. But the reason I want to bring it in there is that during huge events, the fire and smoke map last year, or maybe it was the year before, it wound up crashing because so many folks wound up going to that site to get information on the AQI and everything. So you can utilize one as a secondary piece of information. So some satellite imagery with MODIS, and MODIS is the moderate resolution imaging spectral radiometer, and instrument satellites, the Terra satellite and the Aqua satellite. It's the Terra passing over the equator from north to south in the morning, while the Aqua satellite actually goes the opposite way from south to north in the afternoon. And it winds up viewing the Earth's surface about every 1 to 2. And it gets all this different imagery in different spectral bands. I think there's 36 different spectral bands. Look, I can see some different grade outlines on there, not just the outline showing the state, but there's some lines running across. So it has the areas actually broken out in different regions and different sectors, so you can navigate to certain areas that best suits your needs. So to the next slide, we zoomed in here to California, Oregon, Washington, and we can see this event. So this is the Dixie Fire, which is still going on. It's all it should be contained at the end of this month, they say. But this is the Dixie weeks after it started. Currently, it's about 1 million acres that's gone up so far. But this is, really get some really neat imagery. And if you take a look up at you could actually see that we can zoom in to 250 meters. So we have options of viewing that. So be aware of that. Going in different days. You need to wind up going back to look at maybe like exceptional events or anything like that for your air quality data. You can be another tool that you can use. The data on this actually goes back to 2007. Please. So you don't need to be a modeler, and you don't. We've got there's tools out there that are available that have actually already run models for you. So the Blue Sky Daily Runs, that provides a model of today's and yesterday's smoke, and it provides it in the output as both a map as well as a Google Earth file or the KIT file. This also winds up going back to 2000, and it winds up having some different parameters, different meteorological data that it uses. It has different spatial resolutions. You can kind of see on the left-hand side, like the continental U.S. It goes anywhere 3 kilometers. The CMAC of the Pacific Northwest. It has some other resolutions on it like that as well. So the spatial and the temporal resolutions are going to wind up depending on the area. So next slide, please. If we were to click on said map, it would wind up bringing us this map that's providing us PM data, average. You can see the different fires. If you were to actually click on any one of those fire icons, it would actually give you information about the fire and another link to probably InsoWeb or another fire. If I was doing this live, you would actually see those smoke plumes in an looping action, and that's why you have that right where you can pause it, you can go back, and so once again, this is a great automated file that you can check out as a model. Next. So this one here, this is really quick. This is the National Weather Service hazards forecast for fires. It's going to wind up showing you red. You can see there's some in SoCal as well as NorCal up there. It'll also provide information on any coastal hazards, flash floods, anything like that. And look, not all the way up, but about where it says hazard overview map. If you look to the right, 4 or 5 other tabs, every fire either prediction or fire forecast map, the outlook, fire outlook is going to give you the outlook for the month and current about current fires that are going on. Next slide, please. This one here is also another weather service map in your air quality service, and you can see on the left-hand side in the blue all the different categories, different ozone values, different values, and different dust values on that. So currently, like on this one, I had hovered over the I think the 1 hour average surface smoke. So we can see, yeah, it says there down at the bottom, micrograms per as far as smoke, and the legend on the top, so we can kind of get a better idea. So the last one I want to get to is kind of cool. It's called Playground. So just a couple slides ago, I shared with everybody the Blue Sky Daily Runs. Well, say that's not good enough for you. Really get involved with kind of doing your own kind of prediction. So to the playground. This can be really useful for doing prescribed burns, potential burnouts, or fires that have not been picked up. Blue sky daily runs, so you can wind up doing your own modeling. That's very intuitive, and this get really involved with, or you can kind of take the defaults. Please. So basically, like on the previous screen, you can just like click map, or you can enter your latitude and longitude, and if you look at the top of the screen where it says fuel bed, it will actually pick that up from the map. So say you've got an area and it's burning some shrub or something else, or you may not be sure, you wind up picking that up from a GIS layer in the map, populate what kind of fuel that is. Fuel moisture, you can dry to moist, and in between, the canopy rate, all that different information is on there. If you notice those little question mark icons next to each one of those parameters, each one of those will wind up bringing you to a great resource specific page to that topic. It'll explain, provide you some suggested input. So for example, this is, it's basically showing flaming total consumption over time. Another thing to notice as we're looking at that is over on page that for each one of these inputs, it has standard and advanced. If I was to select the advanced time graph, it would actually allow me to either earlier or later, as well as if I wanted to spread or tighten the graph. Please. What you'll wind up getting out results page where you can see the modeled results of the consumption in acres, as well as different types of emissions, as well as their amount. You can download a report of these calculations and make a choice about what dispersion pathway to use next, based off of what you're seeing. Everything, you can either run V-smoke or run high. What's really about this is you can run this in the future by capturing your URL. It might be a little bit hard to see on the screen, but towards the top right, it says run IDs. You want to just change a few of the different parameters, rerunning by changing a few of the different parameters, consumption, fuel, moisture content, or anything else like that. So next slide. Once we wind up running, in this example, I wound up choosing to run high split as my model. Again, I choosing what meteorology data set I want to use, and for the specific area, I chose the Pacific Northwest. Please. And there's different parameters we can go to standard, advanced. Again, I will reiterate the question mark for identifying what you should to help you calculate what you should do. This is calculated as part of the heat output, and the version below winds up showing how emissions are going to be allocated, whether or to the ground, so anywhere in between that. And that's going to be on your local conditions. Is your weather stable, is it unstable, or is it well mixed? So that's playing part of the actual dispersion. Next slide, please. So this is next slide, please. That's what you'll see. Basically, it's going to wind up running fairly quickly. So this is the final output. It's going to provide you that map. It's also going to wind up having that same looping graphical display along with the lead as far as how much smoke is actually in there, how much PM is going. So it's showing that PM 2.5 dispersion output in the map through a graphical animation. The output will also provide you some different logs. It will provide you a KML. It will provide you configuration files, so if you need to go back. And yeah, that's what I got. Be happy to go into anything with me afterwards, but get in, play with any of these things. Thanks for the time.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Claire Haino, and I'm up next. And I just want to echo what James said about going after Chris, I've had the pleasure of working with both James and Chris over the past 3 or 4 years and learning so much from them. And what I'll share this afternoon is really was informed by both of their expertise and experience in smoke readiness and the tools and resources that can support that. And I apologize if you hear my dog going off in the background. There's probably a delivery or something outside, so sorry about that. But if we can go to the next slide, please, Kelly. So Chris mentioned, of what it means to be smoke ready, and we, a few years ago, some of my colleagues built on that conversation and asked not just like what does it mean to be smoke ready in terms of the kinds of characteristics that Chris was sharing, but the focus of their interviews with a range of state and local agency representatives was what does it mean in terms of what you're doing and in the activities and actions that may be happening in order to become smoke ready. And so across their 30 or so interviews, they looked and really started to identify these themes that to become ready for smoke and to accomplish those aspects that Chris shared. What folks were doing was going through and identifying their vulnerable populations. They were creating and organizing and collecting communication and education materials that were ready to go when there was a smoke event. So it wasn't something that they were trying to figure out, like, what are we going to say and what kinds of information do we need to get out? And they were also thinking about like communication channels and how they're getting the information out. So thinking about who needs to get the information, like in addition to the whole community, like what are their vulnerable like populations and where are they, and what are we going to, what they were going to say to those groups and how they were going to get the information to them when and where they needed it. The other activities and actions, they were also assessing their outdoor air quality monitoring network and filling in gaps or making a plan for how to fill in the gaps. So looking and understanding where are the permanent, if there are any permanent regulatory monitors in the community, and then where might there be places where there aren't monitors, but there may need to be, and what could they do, or what the plan was for getting monitors in those places when and if they needed them. And another aspect similar to assessing outdoor, but this was focusing on indoor. So thinking about what does cleaner indoor air look like, and looking at the needs and planning for those for cleaner indoor spaces. And finally, developing a decision tree. So thinking about who's going to do what and when and at what threshold. Next slide, please. And so we, I'm a researcher, and one of the things that when we looked across these different strategies and action areas, we were thinking like this. Really what they're doing is they're creating like response plans. So the communities that are working to increase their readiness for smoke are going through a planning process for what they're going to do. And so one of the things that we that we're doing a research study on, and that I'm sharing a little bit with you today, is how to go about and what that process might look like for creating that public health wildfire smoke response plan, and the aspects that you may want to think about including maybe like a background, so like the purpose of what the plan is, detail, so thinking through like who is going to do what, when, for how long, across those areas, who's going to coordinate those, but also including some of those other aspects, like what are the vulnerable populations and what kind of communication materials are you going to maybe potentially use? And then also thinking about like next steps, like what is the feedback? How are you going to measure and understand whether this plan and this action is working, and what the plan might be for working adjustment, making adjustments and tweaking that those strategies. So thinking about like taking what does it mean to be smoke ready, and then trying to put that into a plan such that when smoke events happen, it's more of you're taking action that has already been thought through, as opposed to thinking and reacting to the situation in the moment. Next slide, please. And so we recommend a collaborative approach to developing these plans, because, like Chris was saying, having other people involved and really working with partners and stakeholders in the community, we know that taking that approach is associated with better outcomes in other problem areas, and so we think that is likely the same in the case of wildfire smoke and health. And so when we say a collaborative approach, we mean more than just kind of sharing what you're doing in terms of what your own organization or your own group is doing. So more than communicating and even more than cooperating, like, agreeing to not to do it, to take these actions and around, like, in cooperation with another group, and meaning like not communicating what you're doing and agreeing that you won't try to mess somebody else's approach up, but even more than like coordinating, like you do this and I'll do this, but collaborating. And if you can go to the next please, Kelly. But collaborating is really like thinking and bringing people to the table and thinking, like, what can I do and what can you do, that then we can both leverage our resources and expertise to advance this common goal. And the reason that this collaborative approach leads to better outcomes is because it helps build and strengthen relationships. Next slide, please. And so when thinking about so what does a collaborative approach mean? It's kind of having and developing and meeting together on a pretty regular basis to come together and think, like, okay, so what does this problem look like, to learn about, like, the experiences of others and how smoke might be impacting not just your organization or thinking about your perception of how it impacts the community, but really thinking and talking with other people about what it means when there's smoke events and how that impacts their lives. And through those repeated interactions and relationships, things start to happen, like increasing trust and creating that shared mental model of what this issue is and what strategies might be effective and successful in leading to improvements. And also it's through those relationships and connections that resources like information and other kinds of resources can be shared. Next slide, please. And so we think about, okay, well, if we want to take a collaborative approach, we want to create a plan that will do all of those areas and lead to the, help identify vulnerable populations and have materials and understand our monitoring networks. That's a lot of work. And so this collaborative approach allows you to rely on your community to create your community response plan. And so here on this slide, we have like the emergency management cycle that you may have seen before, or preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. And then this other cycle kind of unpacks that preparedness arrow into, okay, so if you're going to get prepared, what does that mean? Well, you're planning and organizing and equipping, training, exercising, and evaluating. And so each of those steps requires a ton of work. And so thinking about planning, we encourage and encourage folks to be creative in thinking about who your stakeholders are. So we talk about bringing other people to the table, and you may want to ask yourself, okay, who are the air quality experts? But not just air quality, who else really maybe experts in communication and outreach and knows how to craft language and craft messaging, or the different components of your community, and thinking about like who might be extra vulnerable and what organizations are already connected with those different groups. And if you have an elderly population, like where are they going for their services and supports? And then once you start kind of get creative and thinking about your stakeholders, inviting their participation and recognizing that their engagement is something that they're giving of themselves to you and to the community. And so recognizing that that's kind of a gift of their time, and really taking advantage of that and becoming a team and spending the time to create those multiple interactions and learning about the issue, but also being intentional about learning about each other. And then, creating opportunities for those folks to get engaged in actually developing and helping put, ideas on paper and writing a plan. Next slide, please. The next, like James shared a whole wealth of resources, as did Chris, on that may help in taking action and reducing the public health burden of wildfire smoke. And one of the one of the things that we try to recommend is to reuse those resources. And by reusing those, you're reducing the amount of work for you and the team, and that's exactly what those resources are meant to do. And so these are just a few of them, and we'd be happy to send links, but I think both Chris and James shared a whole bunch that may be useful. And so the next slide, please. And so, you kind of go through this planning, and we want to also encourage to adapt that approach for your community. So, explore what is currently underway, identify potential subgroups or organizations that are connected with those groups, inviting them to the table, learning about the issue together so that folks can participate and engage if they don't have a background, but also learning about each other and getting and strengthening those relationships, and then creating that first draft of your plan to then plug back into the preparedness cycle. Next slide, please. And so just the last slide, this is just one part. We're doing some research, test driving this. It's one part of a very large effort, and we have a whole host of folks who are advising on that. And so with that, I'll hand it back over to Sarah, and would be happy to follow up afterwards if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our wonderful panelists. I just want to touch on a couple of things. So on the session page, you'll see a PDF of the slides from today, as I mentioned, and also a PDF resource document with some additional links and resources for you to check out. I also want to quickly highlight the Western States Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit, who's a partner of ours. They have a lot of really great wildfire resources, including fact sheets, infographics, and papers. And they recently published a new chapter in their A Story of Health ebook, which is fictional stories based on scientific research to kind of put different environmental health issues in context and kind of give a story to them, provide a little bit of education. So I encourage you to check that out. Next slide, please. And with that, so I don't believe that you're able to unmute and ask questions just as an attendee, but there is the chat feature available. We'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them to put in the chat. I believe there's also a Q&A portion, but I think that's just for adding questions for you to respond to. So any questions you have, please put those in the chat, and we'll stick around for the next little bit and answer any questions you have. Not seeing any questions come through yet. We'll just give it maybe another couple of minutes.
Hey, Sarah,
Let's see if anything.
I've actually got a question for Chris. Not surprising. I just like to from when you to where it is now. I guess the level of community awareness, I guess, like is a percentage, from percentage to where it is now, and I guess how well it's been received.
Yeah, growing up in Eastern Washington, we all grew up with wildfire smoke in the air. And then since 2012, the magnitude of those wildfires changed greatly after that. Before that, if we hit 30,000 acres, that was just a very, very huge fire. Back in the 70s, when I was on fire crews, 3,000 acres was a project fire where they spend a week putting it out. Now 30,000 acres is common, 60,000 acres is common, 500,000 acres is becoming way too common. And I think in the future we'll see 2 million acre fires. So progression of fire awareness has gone up, and with that is the progression of awareness of smoke and health impacts. When I first started talking about smoke-ready communities, I didn't even have the term. We're preparing for that since 2010 on up through the years, and then picked up the term smoke-ready communities in 2016 and went with that. And that's become a national push now, which is very great because it does help people. So now around here, people are very aware of the health impacts of smoke because of our work. We've also developed these partnerships, which are hugely important, both on and off reservations. We have a partnership, it's called the Okanagan River Airshed Partnership in our western part of the reservation and the biggest community over there, because the smoke flows across the river onto the reservation. And so we formed that partnership, and we got national recognition for that with the Clean Air Excellence Award in 2019. So they're very effective, and has many other benefits, as Mary Claire mentioned, is that now we all pick up the phone and talk to each other quite often now, whether you're on the reservation or off, just to get things done on other topics besides smoke. So it's a very dynamic program. Every year it changes. There's more education and outreach materials that we've developed on the reservation and off the reservation too. Just almost every agency now has wildfire smoke information available that you can distribute. And what we do is we take that information, rewrite it to make it culturally appropriate for our area, and add some of our local pictures to it, and then put it out. And so that makes it a local effort, and people appreciate that when they can see there's the mountain in the background and everybody knows which mountain that is. So it makes them look at it a little bit better. So awareness comes up, and it's been very effective.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. And thank you, James, for the question. We have a question from Mike in the chat. I don't know if anyone is interested in taking on that question. Maybe James, if you've gotten a chance to see the chat.
I do respond to Mike, but I was not looking at the chat. Mike's asking, hey, how can EPA to add an EPA air now location, tribe's location, because the location winds up coming from a different area. And all too familiar, that is a scenario that's all too familiar, where the monitor that's miles away and it may be downwind, or it may not be space. It can be representative of the information. The one thing that EPA has been trying to do, or has done, and it's still a work in progress, is that they're integrating the low-cost sensors, more particularly the sensors into that. Unfortunately, the regular monitors are so spread out and far away that it's any representation in every single area. The one thing that I can say right now are if folks are looking at the ARP funding, American Rescue Plan funding, that 2 tribes, that does allow for tribes to possibly for monitoring. Now it's a one-time project thing. Not going to be all that, it's not going to be, because after that year of funding, it's not going to be continuing. So for Mike, I'm not sure your situation or others, you may be able to monitor under the but it may not be all that great because your funding, how is that going to be paid for? Can the tribe pay for it? Tribe touched on that with Noggin. One partnership that a lot of tribes can partner with their cities, their communities, their counties, or to perhaps get a monitor put in or near their tribal lands, communities. And so that's another option. And when there is a regulatory monitoring, most, if not all the time, it does get the AQI or or LMAPs. So Mike or anybody else want to reach out to me directly, I can give you more information on any of those projects that we brought up. I'm going to believe everyone's got my email, but I'll put down just in case. The one thing I always talk about my email, make sure you throw that second J after the J, regional administrator. So.
Thank you, James. Yes, it's very, very important to get information to be able to make those decisions. Mike, as you pointed out, you've got people making decisions based on air quality that isn't really representing your area. So we'd be happy to help talk through how to address that. I know, so we are at time. We maybe have a couple more minutes if there are any additional questions, we can hang out one more minute. And then I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the conference.
I noticed a question in the chat from Sonia. I don't know if you saw this. A lot of our tribal homes still utilize swamp coolers. This last season, a lot of people used filters on the exterior of their coolers. What are some other ways to keep the smoke out?
Yeah, and I was going to address that. Those box fan filter configurations, that there's a lot of videos out. We produced one that's kind of informative, plus the newer box fan filters that are manufactured for that purpose are very effective inside the house with the windows closed. Unfortunately, swamp coolers are probably the worst air quality way to cool your house, even though they're effective in your area, because they bring in outside air right through the wet substance there, and it does just bring a lot of air, and so it's hard to get that combination of filtering in your home and the swamp cooler outside your home. What long term, it'd be good to get those swamp coolers off the homes and put ductless AC heating systems in those homes, because they don't bring in outside air and they cool the homes, because cooling is very important in the wildfire season, because it's 105 degrees outside. You have smoke intrusion into your house. You're just sweltering inside and you can't breathe. So cooling is huge strategy to also address to become smoke ready. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Jeanette, for catching that question. I definitely scrolled right past it. Any other questions before we wrap up our broadcast? not seeing any. Our contact information is on the session webpage, so please do reach out with any additional questions that you have, or if you want to talk through any of the tools, resources, or other information that we shared today. And I wish you all the best day and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.